Chapter 1, verses 4 to 10. The word of the Lord came to me, saying, Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Ah, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak. I am only a child. But the Lord said to me, Do not say I am only a child. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord. Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched my mouth and said to me, Now I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant. The word of the Lord for the people of God.
We had our clergy cluster meeting Thursday here at this church. The other Methodist ministers from our area came, and for the devotion I read the passage from Jeremiah we just heard. And we all shared how we all felt just like little children when called by God. This call is scary. When God calls, we push back. And then I found out something I didn't seem to really realize. I always thought that I was the exception. Oh, I knew a few of my colleagues had been through some tough times. But as I listened to the trips made by people like Joe Spencer and Gene Hagerman and the others around the table, every single one of us had pushed back, had ignored, had gone our separate ways, had done everything except listen to the call. And it finally dawned on me that that is the normal way it happens. But the call is to follow God is one that we have a tough time with. We have several problems with this call. The first problem is we don't want to admit that it's a call. We don't believe it's real because it's hard to see God in the present. You can't see the future at all. We can see in the past, but in the present, God is invisible. Well, there's a story told in the book of Exodus about Moses on top of Mount Sinai, and he wants to see God. Let me see you, God. And God says, silly mortal, if you saw my face, you'd die. But Moses keeps up. And finally God says, well, get in that cleft in the rock there. And so he backs into this cleft, and there's rock on both sides of him. And then God walks by, and as God walks by, God puts God's hand out over Moses' eyes and walks by and then removes his hand. And Moses, of course, then peeks out, and all he sees is God's backside moving away. And this is a metaphor about how we can see God. We see God not in the present, certainly not in the future, but we see God after it's over. And then we look back and we say, whoa, there's fingerprints of God all over this thing. God was certainly here. The second problem with the call is fear. We are fearful beings. I mean, I'm all alone. I'm trapped in this bag of protoplasm. I can't even see out the back of my head. Now, I had a teacher who had eyes in the back of her head, but most everybody I know cannot see out of the back of their head. And so, metaphorically again, things blindside us. And we're scared. We separate ourselves from each other. We hold our opinions in face of everything. And we forget. We forget the power of love I love this poem that Paul wrote about love. I think he's examined the width and the depth and the breadth of it more completely than anybody else. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I think Paul lays it out. And when you go through this list, well, first of all, it's fear that makes me a noisy gong. I read a thing about how to cut your energy costs in the church, and one thing was sit closer to the preacher. There's a lot of hot air going to waste. Well, it is a lot of hot air if I, in fear, refuse to love. All of my knowledge and all of my training and all of the great things that bounce around my brain mean nothing without love. Even if I give everything I've got and more, even if I sacrifice everything to God's ministry, if I don't do it with love, it's nothing. And then comes the checklist. This list is something we can ask ourselves. We should, write it out and check it off every night. Was I patient? Was I kind? Was I envious, boastful, or arrogant? Did I insist on my own way? That one came close. Was I irritable or resentful? Don't ask Sherry. Did I rejoice in wrongdoing and grumble at the truth? I basically might make a C- on most days. How about you? That would make a great spiritual discipline. Just write those out and check them off every night. And think about it. Because love bears all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And we are sometimes, maybe often, so fearful we cannot love first and let the chips fall where they may. And that's the third problem to the call of God, is that means you've got to turn your life over to God, and I'm no longer in control of all the chips and where they might fall, and heaven forbid that we completely turn our lives over to God, because it's scary. Now that I'm 60, I've finally realized, maybe not deeply, but at least intellectually, I have never been in control of my life. So why not let go and let God? I can't predict the future. I can't even see God today. But I know God is with us every single day. And God is offering us a future of a transformed world. Transformed through love. As he said to Jeremiah, don't be afraid. I will be with you through it all. Thanks be to God. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and grant you peace.